Moving away from cellophane, let's look at sequencing. Dr. Chakravarthy developed this diagram to illustrate two slightly different approaches to the sequencing of inquiries necessary to determine a relevant market. In Model 1, the authorities look into evidence of demand-side substitution to determine the market. It's only after that exercise that the authorities try to determine which suppliers could shift very quickly into the delineated market. If they can do so, they are part of the market that has already been delineated, and they are assigned percentage shares of the market even if they are not yet selling in it. If they cannot, they are looked upon as future competitors, which might or might not come in depending on barriers to entry to the market in question. In Model 2, the competition authorities look at both demand substitution, that is, what buyers will do, and supply substitution, that is, what sellers will do, in order to determine the relevant market. If they can readily substitute, they are part of the market, even if they are not currently selling the same good or service as the entities in question. Models are nice, but they often express a result that is too simple and consistent to reflect messy reality. In principle, it appears that the U.S. fits into one of these models relatively well. Please read the following passage. If you said the first model, that would be correct. However, I hesitate to go very much beyond this certainty. When jurisdictions use the second model, it gets messy pretty quickly. For instance, look at how the EU tries to explain it. Personally, I get very little from this passage, and the case law seems even less consistent. So, in Model 1, these uncommitted entrants are counted after the SNP test. In Model 2, they are counted during the SNP test. In the end, it simply may not matter. Here's a quote from a publication by the International Competition Network. While you can read it yourself, I'll go ahead and articulate the first sentence. In any event, there are probably very few cases in which the calculation of market shares under the U.S. approach will differ from the calculation under the approach that includes supply-side responses in market definition. Because of the lack of certainty here, I almost decided to skip this discussion altogether. But it's an important part of process, which attorneys pay close attention to. And it gives us two more jargon nuggets, demand-side substitution and supply-side substitution, both of which sound quite impressive. But the question remains, which model should the PCC adopt? As far as I could tell, there is nothing in the law that requires one or the other specifically. Frankly, I prefer the approach taken by the U.S., just because it appears to be more methodical and easily described. Nevertheless, there could be impetus for adopting the EU approach. Perhaps this was the intent of Congress, if that could ever be ascertained. Look at the definitions used by the EU on relevant product and geographic markets. The PCA adopts them nearly word for word. Does this mean that Congress intended the PCC to use the EU approach for determining relevant markets? You tell me.